I'm Masaru Moro, and we are very proud to welcome you to the first live introduction of the 2017 CX-5 and MX-5 RF. We are confident that you, like us, will come away from driving them impressed. How Mazda continue to over-deliver with outstanding cars and crossover SUVs, it's important to understand where we come from. Now let's talk about the history of Mazda by breaking it into 4 phases, starting with the birth of the company. Mazda has always been based in the city of Hiroshima. We originally started out making cogs and machine tools in 1920, and then began production of 3-wheel trucks in 1931. Then one day, the world changed. That day, as horrible as it was, became one of the defining moments in Mazda history, as barely 4 months later, we returned to vehicle production. Today, Hiroshima is a thriving, bustling modern city. It's this resilience, this perseverance that defines both the city and Mazda today. Amazingly, this is exactly the same building that you just saw, always there as a reminder of what happened. We are the company that never gives up, that follows the road less traveled, and that has forged its own way forward. So, Mazda rebuilt, and then it was time to grow. Mazda has always looked for a way to differentiate itself in the marketplace, and it turned to the rotary engine, brainchild of Dr. Felix Bankel. A license deal was struck, and the engine finally arrived in Hiroshima. But after barely 2 hours of running, it failed. And that wasn't good, as the company had essentially bet its entire future on this technology. So Mazda executives assigned one of their best engineer, Kenichi Yamamoto, to the job. Facing a daunting task, Yamamoto brought on 47 fellow engineers to the project, known as a 47 Samurai, because it was their duty to protect the company. So Yamamoto and his team was successful. In 1967, the company launched the Cosmos Sports, the world's first vehicle with a twin-rotor engine. It immediately put Mazda on the map by showing what Mazda was capable of. So by the way, jumping ahead for just a second, in 1991, my favorite, a belief in the rotary engine was rewarded as the company won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the first, and to this day, the only Japanese company to ever do so. So we consider this to be the ultimate proof of a never stop challenging ethos, as we went to the race 15 times before we finally won. That's perseverance, and that's who we are. So over the years, we put rotaries in everything from cars and trucks and sports cars and finally to a 26-person bus. Some are good, some not so much, but all were unique and allowed the company to follow its own path. But unfortunately, just a few short years after the rotary engine launch, the 70s fuel crisis arrived. The company was in trouble as sales fell, and something needed to be done quickly. In less than 18 months, Mazda's engineers returned to the drawing board and created the GLC, the Great Little Car. Yes, that's really what it stands for, and my first car. Crisis solved. Fast forward to the 90s, the Japanese bubble economy was in free fall, and frankly, we'd lost our way. Building cars for everyone without direction or personality, our market share plunged 60%. And these were dark days for the Japanese auto industry, but again, we regrouped. And this is the car that saved us. In 1989, we launched the MX-5 Miata, and the world became fun again. Mazda went our own way. We reinvented the sports car, now with 1 million sold globally since then and counting. Ever drive a Miata? If you haven't, you are in for a treat this week. So, come 1998, the global industry became challenging again. And these were tough times for everyone. But we proved that we were resilient and were committed to being in the game for the long run. It was time to re-establish the Mazda brand once again. In 1998, we started the initiative of developing a global brand strategy for Mazda for the first time in its history. It Zoom Zoom. And a few years later, in 2008, the floor fell out from under all of us. The Lehman Brothers scandal rocked world economy, and especially here in the US, to their core. The effect on the auto industry was, seemingly overnight, sales dropped from 60 million to 11 million. The average age of cars on the road grew to 11 years for the first time ever. But as I said, Mazda never gives up. We rise to meet any challenge, and we have. An essential part of rebuilding our brand was to create unique technology and products through the Mazda unique approach of monozukuri innovation. We also became more innovative in the way we sold our new vehicles through our Tsunagara innovation, which is how we create experience that drive customer loyalty. Our company is now profitable, reporting record sales and profit for the last fiscal year. So today, we do business in more than 130 countries through 5,200 dealer partners worldwide. And this is how we feel sometimes going up against the big players in the world. We are comfortable with our place in the global auto market at around 2% global market share. We know exactly who we are and where we are going. And we know how to be successful and profitable. So, that's the past. Now, let's talk about the future. Today, we are clear on our purpose as a car company: to bring smiles to people and brighten their everyday lives. This is why Mazda exists in the world, the very reason we build cars. And our never-stop challenging spirit is what drives our passion for developing the best driving vehicle in the world. Our lineup continues to deliver Mazda's drivers-focused DNA, but it is also being recognized more and more for its distinctive design and quality. This is because the brand evolution is built on the pillars of Kodo design and Skyactiv technology. So looking ahead, our brand continues to evolve. We are driving to what we call Mazda Premium. Now, most people's definition of premium means higher price. But our definition of premium is the depth of bond with our customers. Our aim is to build to be loved and sought out brand that customer will choose over and over again. To do that, we are both designing vehicles that stand above their competitors and elevating the brand experience. From our in-dealership presentation to the unique opportunities we provide our customers, such as chance, the event we are hosting this weekend for our loyal customers. The 2016 CX-9 launched many of these Mazda Premium experience, and we have seen customers from Lexus, Porsche, Audi, and others migrate into our showroom. We are challenging ourselves to meet these customers' expectations. Another recent example of what we are doing can be seen with the all-new 2017 MX-5 RF, which stands for Retractable Fastback. To reward our most loyal customers, we gave them exclusive access to pre-order the new 2017 MX-5 RF launch special edition. Only 1,000 were available. Did it work? Yes, the car sold out in 1 week. And to take it one step further, we supplied the very loyal Mazda customer by delivering the first MX-5 RF to him more than 2 months early during the LA Auto Show. It became a Dave Patter's 16th Mazda. 8 times 8 Miata for him. Incredible. So I often get a question, is it working? The short answer is absolutely. The average annual income of Mazda customer has steadily increased in the US over the past 6 years. We are also attracting more educated customers or consumer. So even though we are a very small player in the industry, recently we have been attracting a lot of attention. Our new generation of vehicle is resonating in the right way, as we are now seeing more customers trading in their older Mazda for a new one. Our new generation of products, which made their debut in 2012, has brought us numerous awards from around the world, including both 2016 World Car of the Year and the World Design Car of the Year with our new MX-5. So as mentioned before, our history has been one of continuous rebuilding after major external shocks. So, are we prepared for the future? We are securing our future by shifting our focus to brand value management. All areas in our company will work towards that goal by delivering the unique Mazda brand values to our customers. And the timing couldn't be better. First, we are launching the all-new CX-5 with it going on sale in late March. And in 3 years' time, we will celebrate 100 years anniversary in 2020. And this concept car best represents where we are heading to. What you see here is our vision for Mazda's future. And now perhaps you can understand why we are so confident, so excited about Mazda brand. And thank you for listening today. Now I'm going to introduce you to Masaya Kodama. And Kodama-san is the program manager for the all-new CX-5, as Jeremy mentioned, who has graciously come here from Hiroshima to go over the mission our designers and engineers were tasked with to create our second generation of compact SUV. Kodama-san, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for coming today. So I'd like to briefly explain about the concept behind this all-new CX-5 and its key values. So firstly, let me introduce myself quickly. So I'm Masaya Kodama, program manager for the new CX-5. Please believe that I'm 100% Japanese, all right? Okay. So I joined Mazda in 1991 and I started as an interior engineer. And after the 12 or 13 years of interior engineer, I moved to the program management office, the current division, and worked on the second generation Mazda 3 and the pickup truck, jointly developed with Ford, and also the third generation Mazda 3, before appointed as a program manager of the Mazda 3 in 2014. And now, so then I took over the current assignment, meaning that the CX-5 program manager last year, from the Mr. Otsuka here there, He is now the Vice President of M&A of Mazda North American operation. So, and in addition to the CX-5, I'm also in charge of the CX-9 and the confidential new model. Okay. So let me start with a brief recap of the first generation CX-5. Yep. It was the first product in our new generation, Mazda's new generation models, by fully adopting the Skyactiv technology and the code design. And this is the model that kicked off the Mazda's current period of success. Okay. So the model has been critically acclaimed around the world with around 19 awards globally. That include numerous awards in the US, even if it's end of the model life. So we originally planned for the global sales of 160,000 units, but sales have increased every year since launch. And last year, the global sales exceeded 370,000 units here. So thanks to the customers. Okay, so as Mo-san said, we want to become a Mazda Premium. Mazda Premium means it's not just expensive or high price. So we want to become a one and only distinctive brand that loved by limited enthusiastic customers. And we want to create a strong bond, the emotional connection with customers. And we want to make our customers brighten or vitalized or excited through the driving or life with a car, our car. So that's our dream. So to achieve our dream, we are going to forward with never stop challenging to improve or innovate or evolve our car. Right. So with our latest technology and design, we have introduced the all new CX-5. So I'm going to go through quickly about what's the key values of the new CX-5. Okay, so with in the process of the development of this new CX-5, what we have focused on was the new dimensions of driving pleasure. So, namely, we see things from customers' perspective and based on our coherent, human-centered philosophy. Our aim was to refine every aspect of the car, so such as design or performance or noise levels and so on. We wanted to take every element to a class above. So with the design, we wanted simplicity and honed beauty that comes from when you strip away every unnecessary element. And this aesthetic has been handed down from one generation to the next through the traditional Japanese crafts and the history of manufacturing. And I'll move to interior. So we crafted the interior for enhanced premium feel that will please the passengers as well as the drivers. Okay, so next move to the dynamic performance. So here, we refine the detail of every area to more closely match human senses or human sensitivities. So one key aspect is the G vectoring control. Some of you may know this one. So this technology varies the engine torque slightly, the response to the steering input, and provide integrated control of acceleration forces. So it delivers very much smooth or stable and linearity of a steering response, and providing driving driving experience that is true to our philosophy. That is Jinba Itai, mean the horse and the rider as one. Okay. So I'll show you the movie. The left-hand side is with G vectoring control, and the right-hand side is without G vectoring control. So the difference, it's showing a passenger. So difference is not obvious to only the driver, but also to the passengers as well. So the one key themes of the new CX-5 development is to offer a driving pleasure for passengers as well. So today, I like you to not only drive, but also ride in the passenger seat or back seat, and please feel the difference for yourself. The area in which we made the biggest advance over the previous model is a noise level. So we wanted to create a space in which all the passengers, not only in the front seat, but also the rear seat, could enjoy their conversation without any stress, and then enjoy the driving. So to achieve this, we analyze the noise, mean that the noise where from it's created to the passenger's ear. As a result, we have brought the noise down to the level it isn't distraction for the people in the car. Okay, move to the performance field. So there are no major change in the hardware of our 2.5-liter gasoline engine, but we revised the control software to improve the linearity or response or control. For example, one example. So when you don't want to splash the people on the sidewalk, so press gas pedal slowly and you will take off gently. Or when you want to merge on the freeways, put your foot down quickly and you will find the powerful acceleration. It has been made to match with human senses or sensitivities. Okay, so one key aspect is that offer the driving pleasure for passengers as well. So we have made the rear seat much more comfortable. So they have a reclining mechanism for the first time in Mazda. That also has put a seat heaters and also their own air con vent in the rear seat. And also we have provided plenty of storage space and the power lift gate. So I wanted to notice the big improvement of the functionality when you drive. When we are making the final confirmation for the US spec model for its dynamics, you hear, noise level or performance feel was clearly very much fine. But for the steering and the handling, we team members believed there is a room to improve more linear, more stable. And at that time, I was supposed to take a 10-day summer vacation, but it was cut down to only 1 day since I had to keep staying in the States to work on. And my wife and the kids in Japan went for a vacation trip without me. And I was heartbroken and cried, but nonetheless. So the engineer from headquarters and our US team led by Kelvin and Dave here made a massive effort night and day. And finally, which resulted in the finished vehicle with incredible performance. So I wanted to feel the steering and the handling feel fully during this drive. And also sometimes get a mental picture of my client face. Right. That concludes my presentation. But again, so we never stop challenging. We never stop make people, our customers, smile. So through this all new CX-5, please feel the challenge spirit of Mazda's never stop challenging, keep evolving, keep improving. Okay, that's conclude my presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Well, my name is Tetsu Nakazawa. I'm the product manager for the US market. So we're extremely excited about this all-new CX-5. And I'd like to take you through the Mazda philosophies that make this a great car. So it starts out with Hashiru Yorokobi, which is the joy of driving. We want to deliver smiles. And that's supported by Kodo design language. And as our designers mentioned, car design that approaches the level of art. This is supported by Jinbai Ittai, the oneness, the connectedness of the car and driver. This is also supported by our iActiv-Sense technology. And we do it the Mazda way, which is we respect the driver. So we only intervene when necessary. And the final piece, the piece that we started with the CX-9, is the Takumi, the craftsmanship, raising the bar on the interior, exterior, and the details in the vehicle. So here's our overall Mazda lineup, and hopefully you've had a chance to drive many or most of our vehicles, because then you can really understand how these philosophies are delivered in the product. And today's car is our CX-5, which is targeted at the young families. And these Mazda philosophy is our winning strategy. It's how we differentiate our product and how we attract our target customer. And the Kodo design, the Jinbai Ittai philosophy really makes this vehicle a success in the marketplace. And as Kodama-san mentioned, worldwide this car has been a success. And in the US, as you can see, since its introduction in 2012, year over year, sales have grown. Sales surpassed 100,000 units. This car is our best-selling product in our lineup. And it's done so well, it's #1 in terms of transaction price. And as you can see, our GT trim, which is our highest trim level, approaches 50% of our sales of this vehicle. So I'd like to take you through how we're transitioning from the successful first-generation car. We started with the exterior design, but what we're doing with this 2017, we're evolving it. We're adding the interior design, elevating that even higher. We've also expanded quality and craftsmanship to a higher level in this new vehicle. In terms of driving dynamics, we believe, and Dave Coleman says so, so it must be true, we have the best-in-class driving dynamics, and we've elevated that further in this car. And the final piece is the safety, iActiv-Sense technology. So what we've done in the GT, now we have the full suite of iActiv-Sense standard in the Grand Touring. And we've done things like the radar cruise control. We've expanded that to a full-speed radar cruise. So a lot of good evolution happening in this new vehicle. So Moro-san mentioned about how we're transforming our business. Why do we need to transform our business? Well, it starts with the customer. Because we're getting such a high-quality customer, they expect more. And we need to deliver not only in the product, elevating the vehicle's design, dynamics, quality, but we need to make these customers our brand advocate. And once they're our brand advocate, they tell their friends, and they continue to buy Mazda products. So it's a cycle. They come back, they tell their friends, and it builds our business and makes us a stronger company. And our new 2017, again, they're going to have very high incomes. They're very well educated. And that really makes sense because these customers, Mazda's not the biggest player. It's a vehicle brand that you really do a lot of research. You hear about it in the press. You hear about it through people driving it. And then you understand, wow, this is actually probably the best car for me. So these customers also have premium tastes, and they really enjoy driving dynamics. So all of that, all these areas really make them bond with our brand and our product. So I'll quickly go through our lineup. Again, all these Mazda philosophies from the dynamics, design are standard in all our lineup. But as you move up our lineup, you get a little bit more detail in the Kodo design, and we enhance other features that you get throughout the model lineup. And I'll go over some of the highlights. So starting off with the sport trim, we're going to add standard LEDs. We also standardize the Smart City brake support. And then when you move up to the touring trim, we're adding the rear AC. We're adding leatherette standard on the interior. And then finally, when you move to our Grand Touring trim, we add, again, the standard iActive Sense technology. And then you also get things like power liftgate, which are really high demand. Now, I know a lot of you are writing notes, but we have all of this information in the press kit. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Coleman.
Morning, everybody. You're going to have the pleasure of two presentations from me, one now, one after lunch. So today I'm just going to talk facts. After lunch, I'll get all warm and fuzzy, okay? So if this is too dry for you, I'll solve that after lunch. Just four pretty straightforward things that we're talking about this morning. The CX-5 was already in a very strong place dynamically. It drove very well. So we wanted to mainly not screw up the steering and handling. We wanted to dramatically improve the NVH, as Katama-san mentioned, and improve the ride slightly without making any compromises in our core strengths. And then we carried over the bulk of the powertrain, but we wanted to improve the responsiveness and linearity of the powertrain as well. So I'll walk through sort of how we did that. NVH is kind of hard to express on paper because it's a sound, but we do it anyway. We break it down by two sort of human factors. On one axis, on the y-axis here, we have high frequency noises that are in the frequency ranges that we use in human speech. They're rated on what's called an articulation index because there's sort of a range of sensitivity that the human ear has. And so we more heavily weight the sounds that are in the places where humans are more sensitive. And on that scale, you end up rating in a percentage. So 100% articulation, you can hear everything perfectly clearly, and the more that sound is sort of getting in the way of your conversation, the lower the score is. And then low frequency noises tend to be the ones that just sort of wear you out and make you tired from a long trip here on the x-axis. So a car that's hard to talk in and wears you out will be down here, and a really quiet one that's refreshing will be way up there by the CX-9. You can see the original Mazda. This is where the CX-5 was at launch. When we launched the CX-9, we did a huge push for NVH when we launched the most recent CX-9. We did a huge push for NVH on that car. And I didn't really have time when we introduced that to explain all the different things that went into that. And the thing that everyone picked up on was the fact that we'd put 50 pounds of sound deadening in the floor, which did help. But that actually wasn't the bulk of the improvement from that car. We put that sound deadening in the floor of the CX-5 the next year, so for the 2016 model. And this is what it did. It moved us about that far. All the rest of it was detail work. Tons and tons of details that I didn't go through on the CX-9. So I'm going to bore you with all the details this time, just to prove how hard it was. One thing though, before I get into the details, is the other thing that we targeted was the difference in sound level between the front seat and the back seat, and trying to level that out as much as possible. And if you think about what it's like to have a conversation when somebody has headphones on, and the person with headphones is always talking like this really loud because their sense of sound is screwed up. That's what happens when you have a big difference in sound level between front and back seats. So we brought that difference in sound level down as much as possible. So in terms of sort of the details of what it takes to get that huge jump in NVH, Stuff like moving the wipers down behind the hood line so that the air coming across the hood doesn't hit them and generate that turbulence and that wind noise that comes through the windshield. We had turbulence that was in the gap between the front and back doors there. We added a third seal here that completely plugs that gap so we don't have that turbulence. We did the same thing in the back doors because the way the car is constructed, you end up putting the seal on the door here, so it's actually not visible from the outside. But you can see, we've got the primary seal in here, the secondary one that we already had, and then we added this third one to close off this area so we don't generate that turbulence. That primary seal, it's really hard to see the difference in here, but the new one sticks out a little bit farther. And the reason for that is that at high speeds, the air pressure actually starts sucking the doors out away from the body, and will start to weaken the performance of that seal. And so by giving it a little bit more depth and more travel, it can stay in contact at higher speeds and reduces that high-speed wind noise. We plugged the gap between the hatch and the roof up here between the hinges, similar to what we did on the doors. In the cargo area, there's a lot of noise that comes up through the rear floor. And you can see in the old cargo area, the side panels were hard plastic, which is kind of reflective. We had storage bins down here in the corner that would let sound sneak kind of around the rear carpet. And there was a gap around the edge. It's not that big, but big enough for sounds to come through. And we've completely sealed all that off. The sides are carpeted. We've put a lid over that storage bin. The storage bin's still there, but there's a cover over it. And these gaps are really tight now. It's full contact there between the sides. So that quiets down things quite a bit. We also have an extractor in the rear fender. This is when you close the door, where the air goes instead of just popping your ears. When you've got fresh air coming in through the vents, it blows out through that extractor. So you basically have this little flap back there that's opening up to the rear wheel well, and it's an opportunity for a lot of noise to come in. And we had kind of a direct noise path down into the floor and then up around through those storage bins before. We've blocked that path, and now that air has to travel past a bunch of sound deadening material that knocks out that noise. We put acoustic glass in the front windows. If you zoom in here, you can actually, if you look at the top of the window, you can see it's two pieces of glass laminated together around a sound deadening layer. And then there were a bunch of things that I couldn't actually take pictures of. The windshield's about 0.5 millimeter thicker. The A-pillar shape is shaped to produce less turbulence rolling down the side windows. There's a longer lip on the upper door seal, so along the window channel here where this meets the body, there's a little lip that kind of lines up with the body. We made it a little bit longer to make it more of a flush fit against the body so you don't generate turbulence there. These trim panels here on the B-pillar, there was a tiny air gap behind those, and we could get a little turbulence in there, so we put a seal behind that, so it's just between the trim and the body. The window channels that the window glass actually slides up and down in are tighter fitting. There's a new seal when you open up the back door at the leading edge of the rear quarter window. The chrome trim along here, there was a tiny gap there that a little bit of turbulence could get into there. There's a seal there. The pinch weld around the door, when we put the body together, there's a pinch that the door seal actually kind of fits on. Sound was actually sneaking between the panels, between the spot welds. Some real high frequency sounds could sneak up through there. And so we put a gummy layer inside of the seal that clamps onto that pinch weld so that it seals up against the top of that pinch weld and knocks that sound out. No idea how they found that sound, but there it is. The door actually hangs down next to the body here. And we tightened up the gap between the door and the body when it's closed, so there's less of a sound path there. And then we've got an aerodynamic under tray under the whole car. It's a plastic under tray that we've had previously, but it was a hard plastic, hard surface before, and it's now got like a felt lining to it that absorbs some of the high frequency noises that we're targeting so much for conversation. And then the other sort of sound paths are coming in rather than through air and through turbulence, but directly through the suspension components. So the road noise is generated from the tire vibrating on the surface of the road and then translated in through the suspension. So I had to work on the suspension parts themselves to have them transmit less noise. So normally often the front struts will have a dynamic damper on them, which is just a dead weight on a rubber spring that's tuned to resonate at a certain frequency and cancel out one particular frequency. We've got 2 of those now, targeting 2 different frequencies, and then the natural frequency of the strut itself has been changed by adding a different material to the top of the strut body that just changes the mass there and lowers the natural frequency of that. The subframes, the noise comes in through the suspension, through the subframe and into the body, so we've tweaked the natural frequency of the subframe to try to keep it from transmitting quite as much noise. And some of like the 2-wheel drive ones will have a dynamic damper on them, the 4-wheel drive ones didn't need it. And then we also looked at the whole floor pan itself, and if you look at the way noise is bouncing around in the floor pan and vibrating, there's a couple hot spots where the sound waves sort of stack up. And so we've targeted those hot spots, like we'll put a little weight right on that one spot and knock that down so it doesn't move as much. So now you can see why I didn't go through all those details when we launched the CX-9, because it puts everyone to sleep, but now you at least understand how much hard work it was. So in the interior, we did a bunch as well. One of the things we're trying to do in the interior is knock down the reflections. Once the sound gets in there, we want to absorb it rather than having it bounce around in a hollow room. So we've changed the headliner material to a material that's more absorptive. There's more insulation inside behind the door panels, between the door panel and the interior door panel and the sheet metal. The C and D pillars back around that rear quarter window have more insulation around them. Between the inner door panel and the actual door, there's now a seal, so the noise that's in the door can't sneak around the interior and get in. The carpet now covers a lot of the floor that you don't see, like under the center console and such. We used to stop the carpet there to save a gram, but there was then you're exposing the sheet metal to the air and it can start to excite the noise in the interior. The rear hatch is also a door. We put insulation in that. Between the cargo cover and the back seat, there was always a little gap, and we've got a little spring-loaded door now that leans up against the seat and blocks that particular sound path as well. So that's finally all the things. Now you can see why it's so complicated to get NVH right. Let's talk about steering and handling. For once, this is actually a relatively easy subject because we started with a very solid car already and just tried not to mess it up. In making the car ride better, of course, there's a natural trade-off between a softer suspension and having a slower steering response, quite simply because the body just can't move as quickly to stay on top of the tires. So to recover the steering response, we did a couple of things. We solid mounted the steering rack, which used to be mounted on rubber. We've got a lower friction front strut, so that one of the trade-offs between ride and handling is we can reduce how much of a trade-off there is there if we just let the suspension move more easily and control its motion better. So letting it start to move smoothly without an impact into the cabin, we can get a better ride without really sacrificing anything. And then finally, we added a GVC to this car. So the steering rack thing is pretty straightforward. Used to be 3 rubber mounts on the subframe. They're solid now. Of course, those rubber mounts were doing something before. They were preventing steering wheel vibration and shimmy. So we had to take that shimmy prevention function and move it to somewhere else. So this bushing at the back of the control arm used to be a rubber bushing with 2 little windows in it. It's now a hydraulic bushing. So those windows are filled with oil, and there's a little passage between them, so it's like a little shock absorber. And it damps out those low frequency vibrations that we were trying to isolate with the steering rack bushings before. There's math to prove it. But this is the frequency range that would cause that shimmy, and that's better. The thing about the low friction struts is actually fairly straightforward. If you took the strut away and we just had a wheel and a ball joint down here, when you put the car down on that wheel, the wheels would just fall in. So when you put the strut up, of course, it's got that side load from the wheel trying to push in from the weight of the car. And what anybody does in a strut suspension is they mount the spring perch at an angle to make the spring kind of push back and try to cancel out the vehicle weight. That's the standard practice. Everybody does it. We were always doing it as well. But we've managed to tune that better to more precisely balance out the side loads of the car. And we did that by making a unique spring for the left and right side. We used to have the same spring on each side, and you kind of had to compromise a little bit. So now each side is unique. We also canceled out the fore-aft bending motion because the strut is angled back at quite a steep angle because of the caster angle of the suspension. And so we have less side load means less friction, means the suspension moves more easily. And finally, GVC, I don't know, it's a kind of a weird technology. Some people get it, some people haven't gotten it yet. It's conceptually very simple. It's very difficult to execute. All it's doing is we're putting a little bit of weight transfer onto the front tires when you turn the wheel. Any race driver knows you've got to play weight transfer games to get the most grip out of a car, but it turns out when you're doing it in 15 millisecond increments, you can actually get much more precision and linearity out of simple everyday steering maneuvers by doing this. So what we do is we watch the steering wheel speed and we'll reduce engine torque in proportion to that, and that tiny little reduction in torque will shift a little bit of weight onto the front tires, and just a couple of pounds of extra force on that front tire tightens up the sidewall a little bit and makes the tire respond more linearly. So that video that Kadama-san showed you with the model sitting in the passenger seat and getting flung out of the seat, the reason that worked is because when you don't have that really direct initial steering response, subconsciously you start to turn the wheel and the car doesn't quite do what you want, and you immediately start to speed up a little bit, and you kind of throw more abrupt input into the car right when the tire is starting to respond, and then you have a big kind of jerk. And the passenger who wasn't really aware of what you were doing is kind of thrown off by that. And so the smoother input, we're not actually damping out of the driver's input. We're making this car respond more sharply so the driver doesn't overreact and it actually drives more smoothly. So we're making the driver a better person, really, ultimately. On a sort of napkin sketch level, this is conceptually where things help. Right on center, when you first start to turn the wheel, you want this really linear response, and without the GVC, you tend to have this dead spot that you kind of counteract. The rigid steering rack mount helps more at higher G, higher steering angles. So those two tools together really help get us a much more linear yaw response. And then finally onto the powertrain. Like I said, this is carried over the 2.5 liter Skyactiv-G engine. We've dropped the 2 liter finally, but we did some very small updates to this engine, all detail work in the piston. With this really high compression engine, where the knock limit is really the most important thing. We're trying to run 13-to-1 compression on 87 octane fuel, so it's desperately trying to knock, and we did a lot of very tricky tuning to keep it from knocking. But the more we can kind of push the knock limit up, the faster we can make the engine respond, the more power we can make. And it turns out that the very corner of the piston, right where it meets the cylinder wall, is one of the hottest spots on the piston, simply because we have combustion all across the top and we have a little bit of combustion on the side in that gap between the edge of the piston and the cylinder wall, but we don't have enough cooling from the backside of it to get all the way out to that corner. So that corner of the piston gets really hot. So all we did was we cut the corner off. Boom, problem solved. That hot spot no longer is an ignition point for no longer an ignition point for a sort of spontaneous combustion that will cause knocking. This will give you a sense of scale. I'll pass it around to see how small a little notch is that we took out of there. Just a little edge is cut out. No, we're talking about this, that edge right there, that little notch. So right where it's highlighted in orange here, it's a tiny, tiny little thing. That's a tiny detail you can see. There's 2 other tiny details we changed that you actually can't see with the naked eye. One is the piston rings. So we're talking about the oil ring. There's 3 rings on there. There's 2 compression rings, and then the oil ring is made up of 3 parts. There's 2 scrapers that are designed to scrape oil off the cylinder wall, and then a spacer, this little sort of zigzaggy thing in between them that holds the 2 spacers apart. And what the oil ring is supposed to do, on the downstroke, it's supposed to scrape oil off the cylinder wall so that as the piston goes down, it doesn't leave oil up in the combustion chamber. And then on the upstroke, we want it to skid across any oil that is on the cylinder wall that was in the combustion chamber and leave it there so as the piston goes by, this piston's lubricated. So it kind of has trying to do 2 opposite things on the downstroke and the upstroke. As you can see, the rings are kind of symmetrical and are doing the same thing down and up, even though we're asking them to do different things. So all we did was we changed the profile of the ring so it's got a sharper edge on the downstroke where it's trying to scrape the oil off, and a more rounded one where it's trying to skid across the oil. That looks very simple and straightforward, but for a sense of scale here, we're talking about the knife edge of this. This is that's the profile that we changed. So it's, again, invisible to the naked eye, but did make enough of a difference to be measurably better at scraping the oil off on the downstroke and leaving it on the upstroke. This is a measure of the oil film thickness. Again, we took off the unit so you wouldn't copy our piston rings, but as you can see on the downstroke, it's leaving less, the red one is leaving a little bit less oil film, and on the upstroke it's leaving quite a bit more, so that reduces the amount of friction that the piston sees on the upstroke. And there's the resulting reduction in friction as well. Again, I don't know how they measure these things. It's impressive. Another detail that you can't see that's very subtle, if you look at the sides of the piston where the piston skirts, where that black low friction coating is, those look like flat skirts. They're not flat, they're slightly barrel shaped. And we've started making the two sides different from each other, and it's because the two sides see different loads. So the piston is side loaded in these two conditions, on the compression stroke when the piston's going up, and on the power stroke when it's being driven back down. In both those cases, the piston's being pushed down quite hard. On the compression stroke, it's being pushed down by the air that it's compressing, and then on the power stroke, of course, by the combustion. So on the compression stroke, the difference between these two conditions is the angle of the connecting rod. So on the compression stroke, the connecting rod's over here. When you push down, it's going to fall over that way. It's leaning on this cylinder wall. On the power stroke, the rod's facing the other way. We have a much bigger force, and it's a much bigger side load into the cylinder wall. So basically, we have a really high load on this piston skirt and a relatively lower load on this piston skirt. So we made different profiles for these two sides. This is kind of a confusing chart. This is looking at the profile, a very exaggerated profile of that skirt at different angles radially around the piston. But you can basically see that on the new profile, we have a very large contact area for that highly loaded skirt. And on the lightly loaded skirt, we have a much smaller contact area, so there's less friction from that. So together, that design reduced the sliding friction from the skirts by about 13%. All of this added up to almost no difference in peak power. The reality is that we didn't really do this stuff for peak power. We did it for drivability and real-world performance. And this is very analogous to what we did with the MX-5 engine. That was basically the same 2-liter Skyactiv engine that was in the Mazda 3. And what do you know, on a peak power dyno chart like this, it made exactly the same power as the Mazda 3. If you drive those two cars, they drive very differently. And that's because the MX-5 engine had much better knock resistance than the Mazda 3 engine, because we told people to put premium fuel in it. And then we used that better knock resistance to tune the throttle response to be a lot sharper. And that's the same thing that we did with this engine. We didn't worry too much about the peak numbers and worried about real-world drivability. So it's a little harder to illustrate real-world drivability. We'll put you in the real world in a second. But this is the kind of tests that we do to kind of prove out what we're trying to do. If you look at here, this top chart is looking at the gas pedal input. So right here, we start rolling into the throttle and we roll into it about 35%. This is sort of just a normal city speed launch. And the delay between when the gas pedal input starts and the engine the car actually starts to accelerate is about 240 milliseconds. It's 100 milliseconds shorter than it was before. 250 milliseconds is about the limit of human perception for a throttle delay. So we're always sort of trying to get underneath that threshold. This is an example from a freeway acceleration scene, a very light acceleration. This is like just catching up with the car in front of you and sort of maintaining your speed. And again, you're at a constant throttle, at a constant speed, and you roll into it a little bit, about 15% more. And again, a shorter response before it starts to accelerate, and a more direct, a stronger buildup and acceleration than we had before. This over here is looking at, again, this time a 40% standing start launch, and looking at acceleration G versus vehicle speed. As the car picks up speed, how does the acceleration sort of taper back down? Because basically you'll give it some throttle and wait for the car to kind of catch up to your target speed. And previously we were doing the 1-2 upshift a little bit early. And so you'd have a good launch right at the beginning, and the G would drop off fairly quickly as it got up into the higher gears more quickly. So we've delayed the 1-2 upshift. This sag here is the shift on both of those. And it has a sort of a more natural shifting rhythm and a stronger acceleration feel. It feels a little bit more natural, more how you would drive the car if it had a stick. And then this much more complicated scene here. on the freeway, cruising along on constant speed and giving it about 50% more throttle, kind of like changing lanes and passing a truck kind of thing. Not a 2-lane pass where you'd be wide open throttle, but just a freeway pass where you're just going to go a little bit faster. And you can see when you initially tip in, the G builds up more quickly. When you finally get deep enough in the throttle, it has to do a downshift. That downshift is happening earlier, and the shift is shorter. It's a quicker shift. Sort of our benchmark on shift time is how long does it take from when the G starts to drop to when it recovers to where it was at the beginning of the shift. And so we've gotten that down, again, under that quarter a second. That really is very noticeable. That's all I'm going to talk about for now. I'm going to get into more weird esoteric stuff after lunch when your stomach is full and you're really groggy. But for now, Matt's going to tell you about more electronic features and guys with kale in their teeth, right?
Morning, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Matthew Valbuena. For those that do, I apologize. I am the R&D engineer for Mazda. I work on in-vehicle technology and the human-machine interface that you use to operate. So in starting with the discussion on the new CX-5, I'm going to talk about Mazda's iActiv-Sense philosophy, and it's all about respecting the driver. So when we look at this pyramid here, we want to, with the design of the vehicle, maximize the range of the conditions that the driver can comfortably control the vehicle and is aware of their surroundings. But as the risk of an accident increases, we want to provide alerts to notify the driver so they can take control of the situation. And in scenarios where the accident becomes unavoidable, we want to be able to step in and assist the driver to operate the vehicle. And of course, when an accident does happen, we want to help protect the occupants of the vehicle by the design of the crash structure itself. But my focus here is going to be on what we call the base technology, and that's really just understanding the driver. So when we look at the interior of the vehicle, the design, the layout is really there to support the driver. Mazda takes great pride in a driver-centered interior layout. So the steering wheel and the pedals are centered around the driver's seating position. The armrests are centered around the driver so that they're at equal height and they provide the support for the driver if they wish to rest their elbows. And even things like the shifter. On the new CX-5, we moved the shifter up 60 millimeters to put it in a better position so it falls more naturally underhand. So if the driver wants to change gear, they can do so much more easily than before. And things with outward visibility. On the new CX-5, we moved the A-pillars rearward at 1 3/8. So this gives you a more panoramic view out the front windshield, which is great for detecting pedestrians outside, but it's also great when you're on a windy road and you're looking into the corner. And even by small details, by reshaping the exterior contours of the side view mirror, we've maximized the gap. So in this example here, you're seeing school children on a sidewalk. And you can see the difference in visibility between the two scenarios. We've made sure that you can see what's going on outside the vehicle so the driver can react appropriately. And then we also have a very strong infotainment philosophy. We want to make sure that all the information that's presented to the driver in front of the driver is relevant to the art of driving. So driving information is found on the gauge cluster and on the active driving display. But things such as infotainment, convenience functions are off to the center. So that's where you're going to find your multimedia display and your HVAC controls. With the new CX-5, we finally have an active driving display. We've had this in other vehicles, and in the CX-9, we have the windshield base. This CX-5 now has the windshield-based active driving display. As a comparison with the previous CX-5, when you were looking at the gauge cluster, you were looking at a focal length of 800 millimeters. So the time it took you to look at the gauge cluster and then look back out at the road ahead, it took a couple of seconds for your eyes to adjust, or a couple milliseconds. But that adds delay to your reaction time. By utilizing the windshield-based active driving display, the driver's eyes are farther out on the road ahead. 2.6 meters out is where the virtual image appears. The focus time for that virtual image to the roadway ahead is dramatically reduced. So it keeps the driver aware of what the vehicle's doing, as well as what's going on outside the car. And for the new CX-5, we've also tied the positioning, the height positioning of the active driving display is now tied with the seat memory position. So when you have different drivers and they have different favorite seating positions, those two data sets are correlated. So when you have a taller driver, the display adjusts accordingly. On the active driving display itself, it shows a variety of information. So here, what you're seeing is everything above this vehicle above is really kind of what's going on in the outside world. It's showing you the posted speed limit. It's showing you the road, the maneuver that you need to take for navigation. And then below that point, it's showing you what your vehicle is doing, what's in your blind spot. And so it's basically giving you the speed, your eye active sense information, as well as navigation information. Slightly below that, we have the cluster meter. So the CX-5 inherits the same 4.6-inch display that was available or first introduced in the CX-9. So using the info button on the steering wheel, you can toggle through 5 different displays. You have the eye active sense safety display, a compass display, 2 trip meters, and then your maintenance notification monitor. So once we get beyond just the basic layout and presenting information to the driver so that they're aware of what's going on around them, we're going to step it up a little bit and support the driver. And this is where the active safety comes into play. So the new CX-5 has the full suite of eye active sense safety technologies. And these highlighted ones are the ones that are new for the 2017 CX-5. So it all starts with the camera. We utilize a new camera with the CX-5, and the new camera brings new benefits. One of them being sensor fusion. By combining multiple sensors into one housing, we've reduced the size of the sensor housing that's behind the rearview mirror. If you look at the previous CX-5, that panel was much more, I guess, obtrusive in design compared to the new CX-5. But the added benefit of the upgraded camera is it now supports traffic sign recognition and Mazda radar cruise control with stop and go functionality. So the traffic sign recognition is going to automatically display the posted sign information on the active driving display. It utilizes navigation data and the camera data. So as you're driving along and the speed limit's 55 miles per hour, you're going to see 55 on the active driving display. As you drive farther down and the speed limit changes, you're going to notice that the active driving display is updated to show the lower speed limit. And it doesn't just only show the speed limit. It'll show you stop signs as well as do not enter signs on the active driving display, keeping the driver informed. The big, I guess, feature with eye active sense is the Mazda radar cruise control. The previous MRCC or the previous CX-5 could only do slow and go. The Mazda radar cruise control only worked at speeds over 19 miles an hour. Thanks to the upgraded camera hardware we now can support a full stop scenario. So if traffic is ahead, you're following, the car ahead of you stops, the new CX-5 will bring the vehicle to a complete stop. Once traffic resumes, the MRCC will resume and you can continue to follow. And if you're stopped for quite a while and the car ahead departs and you forget to accelerate, you'll get an indication on the gauge cluster saying, hey, traffic's moving, go ahead and resume. So moving from the technology, we also paid a huge amount of detail and attention to craftsmanship. And a lot of this is really minor details, but we're obsessed about increasing this premium feel of the CX-5. And for us, the connection between the driver and the vehicle starts at the very first touch. And for most people, that's touching the door handle. So what the engineers in Japan did was they studied how people interact with the door handle, how they grab the handle. Is it overhead grab, underhand? Are they doing it with 2 fingers, multiple fingers? And they made a couple of different clay molds that were testing out their hypothesis. Then by using a paint transfer film on the hand, they can observe the contact points that the people were encountering the door handle with. And by creating multiple prototypes, they created a new ideal contour shape. What this means in terms of CAD data, the previous CX-5 versus the new CX-5, as you can see, the new CX-5 grab handle is much thicker. The big difference, though, is this minor notch right here on the right portion, and that's to give a greater clearance for the index finger and the middle finger to grab the door handle, allowing for a more comfortable grip. And these are actual pictures from the same angle showing the differences in the handle. Super minor, but it gives you that much more of a confidence-inspiring feeling when you open the door. When we look at the inside of the vehicle, that same attention was paid to the door handle placement on the interior. Now, this seems strange, but what we did is we moved the door handle release lower and more rearward towards the driver. And the benefit of this is it minimizes the amount of time and motion required to open the door. With the previous CX-5, you would unlatch the door, you'd probably have to move your hand to push the door open. With the handle closer, you can bump it with your elbow to get the door open, making it much easier to get in and out of the vehicle. Comparing the previous CX-5 to the new CX-5, I like to say it's a CX-9 inspired experience. So there's been much more attention paid to the materials, the textures, the craftsmanship involved. So there's extensive use of French seams, which are this multi-stitch seam pattern on the upholstery, on the door panels. If it looks soft, it is soft. The upper portions of the door panels are padded. The center console's padded. The armrest is padded. So everything was designed in this human-centered factor of improving the sensations, the sense of touch, the sense of the appearance. Looking at the steering wheel, we even made tweaks to the design of the layout. And with the CX-5, we finally have a heated steering wheel grip available. But we've also streamlined the grip and the layout. So looking at the cross-section of the steering wheel, instead of sticking with a more traditional oval layout, we went to asymmetrical steering wheel layout that provided a better flat spot for the thumbs, for the driver. So it became a more natural grip for them to use. And then by streamlining the switch layout, it also minimized the thickness of the steering wheel spokes, making it more comfortable for the driver's fingers to wrap around the steering wheel so the pinky and the ring finger clear the spokes of the wheel when you grab the wheel. We were also able to minimize the obtrusiveness of the airbag by minimizing the size of the airbag cover. We've also realized that obviously with the CX-5, it's for many families with kids and carrying passengers. So we've improved the rear seat ingress. The rear door previously on the previous CX-5 only opened up to a maximum of 74 degrees. The new rear door hinge opens up to 80 degrees, and we've reshaped the door panel so the door panel itself is thinner. The benefit is if you have coworkers, if you have kids, or you have an infant, you now have more room to dock the car seat in the back seat, or you have more room for your kid's backpack as they're climbing into the car. We've improved the accessibility of getting in and out of the vehicle. On top of that, as Kodama-san mentioned, we added a reclining function to the rear seat. This is consumer survey data from the Japanese market. So out of all the comments that they collected on the previous CX-5, 18% of the comments were just focused on the rear seat. And of those rear seat complaints or comments, 70% of it was about the seat back angle, either not being comfortable or not being adjustable. So what we've done is we've changed the default angle. The original default was 22 degrees. We've tilted it back to 24 degrees, which reduces the strain on the torso and provides better support. But thanks to the two-step latch, we now can recline it back to 28 degrees, offering greater degrees of comfort. And the best part is even with this new default angle at 24 degrees, there's been no loss of cargo room or utility behind the seats. And speaking of the rear seats, we've made sure it's a more premium experience. We have finally added the front console-mounted rear HVAC vents, so the rear passengers get their own control over their heating or cooling. On top of that, we added heated rear outboard seats. So in the center console, you can see there's the heated seat switches that allow the rear seat passengers to control the seat temperature. And then we also have two amp high amperage USB ports in the rear center console so they can keep connected and comfortable as they're being driven. So we aren't the first with an adjustable power rear liftgate, but the new CX-5 finally offers one. So you can see some of the comments that we've had from online survey users or online forums or Facebook. They express huge interest in the car, but the lack of a power rear liftgate was the deal killer for them. So the new CX-5 offers a power liftgate, and of course, we also added the functionality to make sure that it was adjustable. So if you have obstructions over the vehicle, a low garage ceiling height, or if you're of shorter stature, you can adjust the operating angle or the opening angle of the power liftgate to your preference. The other tweak we made was to the load floor. So Dave mentioned that how we have it carpeted and it's a continuous piece to minimize NVH. The other benefit, though, is by redesigning the rear seat layout, we have a more continuous, flatter load floor. On the previous CX-5, you can notice there's a noticeable step. So if you were going to Costco and you had a large item and you were trying to slide it, you would hit that step and then you would have to either open the rear door and jostle your package over. With the new CX-5, the load floor is more flat, so it's easier just to slide everything forward. And because the entire cargo area is carpeted, you no longer have to worry about abrasions and scuffs as you're throwing gear into the back of the vehicle. We also incorporated some thoughtful technology. Now, this isn't completely revolutionary, but we added windshield wiper defrosters. So when you're using the rear defroster, that same in-glass heating element now exists below the windshield wiper blade, so it'll defrost the windshield wipers in cold, snowy weather. On top of that, we looked at the automatic headlights and automatic windshield wipers. So if you have them both set to auto and the automatic wipers swipe for more than a few seconds, it'll turn the headlights on, because in many states, if the wipers are on, the lights need to be on. So we've taken that step and just said, hey, using logic, we've offered this functionality for consumers. We also paid a great deal of attention to visual noise. So visual noise is kind of a design term, but in home improvement landscape, these are examples of what visual noise is. It's something that catches your eye, something that, for whatever reason, you're drawn to. So here, it's this row of flooring tile that's not aligned with the rest of them. On the end here, it's this mosaic tile that doesn't quite go all the way around, or the drywall between the interior and exterior corners. These are things that, to many people, they don't notice, but to some people, it drives them completely nuts. In human terms, it's the piece of kale in your teeth. You don't know it, but people are just staring at it and they're fixated on it. Well, the CX-5, the previous CX-5, had those same types of visual noise issues. There was issues with the displays being inconsistent, or certain panel alignments, or certain grooves in the vehicle that just drew your eye. And so with the new CX-5, the designers paid quite a bit of attention to minimizing all of those so they wouldn't be perceptible. They made sure that all the displays were consistent. The same typeface, the same illumination colors, the same text style, just to make sure everything was in complete visual harmony in the interior of the vehicle. Looking at the interior cross-section, these were some of the visual noise improvements. And these are all about minimizing visual gap, making sure the textured grain pattern is consistent from panel to panel. It's things like making sure that the grab handle aligns with the edge of the sun visor, because that's more visually harmonious. On the exterior of the vehicle, they paid a lot of attention to how panels transition or how they line up. So you're looking at the headlights, or what can be seen through the front mesh grille, how the taillight interacts with the rear fender. And even with the new CX-5, on the pre-production models, they weren't done eliminating visual noise. On the left here, this is a close shot of the grille. And in the circled areas, what you're seeing is a reflection of the underside of the surface above it. So even though most people wouldn't notice it, our design engineers did, and went through great efforts to make sure those were gone. And so we've addressed what you see and what you feel. We even considered what you smell. By working with our leather suppliers and with our adhesive trim suppliers, we redesigned the interior, odor content of the vehicle to minimize any sort of negative odor smell. So when you get that new car smell, it's because there's not as many chemicals or anything malodorous in the vehicle. So looking at the door trim and the IP, we really wanted to make sure the entire vehicle was this pleasant, harmonious experience. And then from there, the next sense I'm going to cover is the sound. So with the CX-5, Mazda has worked with Bose for a long time, and we've been continuing what we started with the CX-9, which is this premium Mazda signature sound. But in order to do that, we had to understand what is sound quality reference. For some people, it's a huge megawatt home audio system. For quite a bit of people, it's a portable Bluetooth wireless speaker. And for way too many people, it's those white earbuds that they listen to the music from their phone. So we considered how they listen, but then we also had to consider what they listen to. Are they fans of live arena rock, or instrumental live intimate performances in a jazz club, or huge arena EDM performances, or just really aggressive grunge rock? What they listen to mattered as well. So we had some specific goals with the audio system. But instead of looking at numbers, we were looking at the human element, this human-centered experience. And so we were focused on the idea of a feeling of power, the feeling of clarity and response, as well as imaging. We wanted it to be a pleasurable listening experience that exemplified what premium audio should be. So I'm sure most of you guys have seen this Life of a Driver commercial. In this commercial, it shows the life of this young man as he moves through the Mazda family. But in every single one of these scenes, you know there's a song playing on the radio. As he's cruising down the boulevard with his buddies on a Friday night, you know there's something playing. And in every single one of these scenes, music is the soundtrack to your drive. It enhances the experience. I'm sure you guys have all had your favorite songs, and when it comes on the radio, what that makes you feel as you're driving. We wanted to make sure that we were giving the driver the best soundtrack to their drive. So in realizing how people listen to music, obviously CDs have gone away. The new CX-5 doesn't have a CD player. Everything's going based on streaming content. We made sure to optimize the sound quality of the Bose premium audio system to reflect the lower quality source available with streamed audio. So by looking at the Billboard music charts over the last 25 years, we actually added more music to the playlist that Mazda engineers and Bose engineers used to tune the sound system. So instead of just using Eagles Hotel California, we added more contemporary tracks because that's what our customers are listening to. So in using all this criteria, we ended up with a new system setup for the new CX-5. The biggest difference is we now have smaller speakers in the front doors. We used to have 9-inch drivers in the front door, but no bass box solution. By incorporating the spare tire mounted bass box, we've improved the bass response throughout the vehicle, but the other benefit, I'll get to in a little bit, is we've achieved our goals in terms of power, clarity, and imaging. So we now have a dual bass source. That bass box and the spare tire plus the front doors gives you that immersive bass experience no matter what seat you're in. And with the new tweeter design on the A-pillar, we've given you that eye-catching appeal with the sound system, and we made sure to keep the mesh design open just like we did with the CX-9 so that it doesn't hamper the sound experience in any way. And then touching back on the speaker benefit, the other added benefit is because we went to a smaller driver in the front doors, we've maximized the utility of the front door storage. So not only are we giving the customer better sound with this Bose premium audio system, we're giving them a greater degree of utility by increasing the accessibility and the storage usefulness of the front doors. That's my time. I'm going to bring up Julian, and Julian's going to cover all of the advancements that design has made with the new CX-5. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Julian Montousse. I'm the design director for Mazda North America. So my colleague has been very good at explaining a lot of the specs metrics. My presentation is going to be a little bit more abstract, but the purpose is design is to really showcase more of this kind of irrational seduction through all of our cars. And therefore, we try to tell your inner voice. It's kind of subconscious of why do you have to fall in love with this vehicle? So, Morrison talked about, the whole brands leaving the commodity landscape and us reaching premium. When we designed the new CX-9, and actually CX-9 and CX-5, those two vehicles, we had to behave as engineers and designers as if we were already premium. And even though the brand needs more equity to go towards premium, those two vehicles already are premiums. And it's pushing the brand toward this new place in the marketplace. So today I'll speak about the CX-5 kind of design analysis, but also about this new practice of design, which is the evolution of Kodo design, the exploratory preparation, which is much more of a kind of an engineer type of falling in love formula for everyone to feel within a few seconds, rather you look at the car 100 miles away or 10 foot away, 100 foot away. So obviously, always start with the epicenter, Jim-Baitai. It's not just engineering, but design have to induce this notion of Jim-Baitai. When we look at the interior volume and architecture, we want to make sure that we embrace this kind of human-centric architectures. And then obviously on top of that, Kodo design, which was introduced in 2009 with a concept car Shinari in Milano. And that was a huge departure for us because Kodo design, per its definition, is kind of the transition of speed through the surfacing. So we had to move from a car that looked quite playful to something a lot more sophisticated. So this is a picture kind of of our lineup. And you can see there is a lot of great consistency, right? All the cars have one singular entity. We kind of give up the smile to have much more of this kind of visceral attitude, right? There is a little bit of kind of darkness through the front face expression. All of this is helping the whole brand moving towards more of this kind of premium landscape. But with that said, design is looking at the evolution of Kodo design, and we have to broaden the expression of design. And we kind of lay our work on those three different disciplines in order to evolve design. And the first one is obviously beautiful dynamism. And what I mean beautiful is how do we provoke that irrational seduction the first time you look at the vehicle? Human craftsmanship and then Japanese aesthetic. So human craftsmanship, I spent a lot of time in Japan, and one of the number one kind of behavior in Japan is like they do believe that when a master craftsman walk on a vehicle, on a piece of steering wheel, they inject a lot of energy into the product. That energy is contained by that object, and when the customer interacts with that object, with that vehicle, that energy is released towards them, making them feel special, making them feel falling in love with this vehicle, making them feel Hashiro Yorokobi. So we have to leverage this kind of personalized craftsmanship approach for all of our vehicles. Now the second one is Japanese aesthetic, and there's a huge kind of different direction from our competitors, Japanese automakers and Mazda. We try to showcase intensity by purification, so which is very much different than all other Japanese automakers that are much more violent in their expression. And therefore, we looked at the way you do a Japanese garden, what type of purified emotion and peace you feel when you look at some of Japanese architectures and so on. And then this one, the exploratory preparation. This is a really unique process to Mazda. Again, a lot of these other design studio, they go straight into designing the car on package with all the engineering restriction to it. Mazda, we want to retain an emotion. We want that emotion to be purified into the vehicle. And I think that's why our vehicles are so successful on the road today. They're so clear from a design perspective, is because we have a process that allows to retain that emotion into the product. So what we do is through the exploratory preparation process, we build speed forms. And speed form that only concentrate a purified expression to it. And that way we can align the entire company into one single expression. When you look at a vehicle, everyone feels something special. So we try to purify the expression into a speed form. So the first one we we worked on, this is called actually the acceleration of light, or speed of light type of exercise. And Kodo being the expression of speed, we didn't want to go the typical kind of ovoid shaped teardrop going through airflow, right? This is about the burst of light coming at you, becoming much more intense and then solid at the end. And that was like the first inspiration for the actual, here's a small animation, for the body side of the vehicle. And after that, if you've got time, there's another speed form here on the left, which was kind of a second step, and that speed form looks somewhat from a car perspective with somewhat the proportion, and it takes some of that purity in the first speed form into the character line of the second speed form. And then obviously we put it into the car later on. So to resume, we're moving the brand from a double rhythm type of exercise on the body side to a much more simple, very crisp one gesture. So here you have actually, the way the reflection-based surfacing is articulating the volume, taking into account the first speed form. And then you have it on the vehicle, you can see from the crossfade that you have the same attitude, and the way, again, the reflection-based surfacing is showcasing the first intent. And even though this is quite abstract, there is a real correlation from all of those speed forms, and it's really more of a kind of a car as art practice, rather than just a rational takeaway that, sometimes designers get overwhelmed with so much restriction that the deferred design intent, that purity, that emotion get lost very quickly. So those two steps actually help Mazda retain that emotion along the way. So again, to resume, beautiful dynamism. even craftsmanship and Japanese aesthetics. Now looking at the exterior design analysis, I'm not going to go too much in depth into it, but basically we have to carry on a very strong belt line for the car to feel very well established on the vehicle. Now from the three-quarter front, obviously the silhouette of the vehicle is very strong. You're going to see the car like 100 feet away. The inverted grille gives you certain type of aggressivity, right, of the vehicle. But also the way we defragmented the whole grille was for us in order to show a lot of depth, right? Usually the grille is much more of an applique. You have an A side and we just punch a contour and we have this grille kind of sticking out. On this vehicle, and actually the new CX-9, we defragmented all of this volume in order to have the grille much more stronger, and you show a lot of depth. And if you look again, the cars outside, how sharp we're able to stamp a kind of negative angle on the sheet metal. Everything has a really high quality, and again reinforce the strength of this insertion of the grille through the vehicle. Again, great side views. If we pay attention actually to some of the reflection-based surfacing, the idea is to give a lot more power into the rear wheels. We call it a traction form. So therefore, if you follow all the reflection, you have this kind of triangular, all of those converge into the rear wheel. The front axle is actually a lot lighter, which gives the car a lot of stability, visual stability on the road. Reflection-based surfacing, we talked about it. You can see some kind of those reflections. Those are kind of really designed early on into the design process. We looked at how is the environment going to reflect on the car. We don't just rely on hard edges, but we really look at like how those kind of simple white line is going to reflect on the car. This was going to touch your inner voice of you falling in love with the vehicle. Front face signature, obviously the biggest difference here is a 5-point grille, and signature wing is now under the eyelid to bring the center of gravity lower. We still have LED lamps. We're able to, with the contouring of the lamp, to get much more of this kind of aggressive, kind of visceral feel to it. Have a closer look. This was extremely difficult, to achieve. This kind of negative space, defragmented look. This kind of sheet metal section was insanely hard to do in production. But overall, if you look at engineering, craftsmanship, design, they all work very well together in order to achieve this kind of master puzzle. Here's how the front lamp kind of lit up. Obviously, we have not a little connection with this signature wing, but still gives you this kind of visceral expression. Same on the rear. Pretty much the same formula, very squished in order to get the same expression. And then the wheels, we have to aim for lightweight. We don't want to have the same kind of design formula for the wheel. I actually want to have a contrasted, a little bit more kind of mechanical look through two different process of diamond cutting. We have this kind of contrast between the dark and the bright, which makes the wheel visually as big as it can be. Solid crystal, that looks actually insane. When you look at that car driving in real life, it kind of jumps into your eyes. This is a very complex process that engineers and designers work together, but the bottom line is we want to seduce the eyes, right? And when you look at this vehicle on the street, you have this kind of liquid metal quality. There's so much depth to it. What we've done is we worked out the surfaces and the paint together. Right, it was not just an after-fact kind of applique. Let's put a gray color on the car. We walked out the surfaces of the vehicle and we tuned up the paint in order to show the highlight to be extremely bright red. And as it goes, negative into the shadows, the red actually goes black. Looking at the interior, Matthew talked about the craftsmanship, but yeah, again, if you take a look at the seat, we really achieve again another level of craftsmanship here with the new CX-5. Driver-centric, we talked about, how do we move all the components around in order to make you feel connected with the vehicle. Compared to the older CX-5, the whole console was much lower. So when you tend to drive, you feel like you're kind of like falling towards the center. We want to respect both space, driver and passenger. And we want to also raise all of the, we call it the water line. You know, if you have a tub and you fill it up of water, that water line is when the upper and the lower kind of meets together. That water line is much higher, meaning that all of those components are much closer to the driver and give you this much more kind of intimate and direct kind of action of control with the vehicle, and also empowers the drivers. So couple distance, obviously we had to make the console as wide as possible to empower the drivers. Purposeful aesthetics. If you look at the seat, we kind of deconstructed a lot of the bolsters in order to make you feel comfortable, but also very well maintained. And then, you know, it's basically, we call it well-being, but the overall palette of the interior between the light and the dark, we have a new kind of applique called the metal wood, which bring the warmth of the wood and the metal into one kind of components. That whole kind of palette, we want to make you feel good when you drive the vehicle, right? It's kind of this subconscious surrounding that makes you feel very comfortable. The same with the front. And then here some shots of the vehicle coming out of the museums. Great lifestyle. We talked about the power lift gate, obviously very, very handy. Another tricolor rear. You can see how the car looks extremely stable, and you know the way we really massage the reflection on the corners to give you this kind of trapezoid stance on the back. Another tricolor front, and again a great view. This wonderful house in Malibu. So to resume, you know, for design, what we're trying to do is change the process into something that can be seen abstract, but allow us to retain a pure expression. You know, intensity by purification. This is like the master kind of Japanese guideline that makes our car kind of unique. So thank you very much.
One of the most common questions we get is, you know, what did you guys benchmark? This is one of our benchmarking drives. We were actually comparing these two cars against each other, and for the comparison test that we were doing, the one in the back was better. We do attribute benchmarking rather than the whole vehicle. So we were doing trying to figure out what brake feel is the best, what really matches what we want to feel. Strangely, the car in the back has drum brakes in the back, and yet it still has the better pedal feel, higher rigidity, more easier to modulate, shorter feet play. This had the best high-speed braking posture. It's very stable at high-speed braking, and it also brakes from a higher speed. But this is the kind of benchmarking we actually do, just trying to figure out what is the ideal target for a particular attribute that we want to be doing. For the most part, we focus on this Jinbei-tai that we keep hammering on all the time. This is a real concept that really is sort of behind everything we do. The imagery is from Japanese horse archery, which I think you can say Jinbei-tai to somebody who's Japanese and it probably immediately means something to them. And we just all scratch our heads and have to start explaining it. But really, it's about that sort of relationship that rider and horse have. That is, you know, not only can they interact and move as one body, but the closeness and the amount of control that they have there really actually ends up forming an emotional bond. I think that's why it's such a powerful imagery for Mazda, is that we're trying, through making the car really intuitive and easy to drive, and really natural feeling, that people will bond with our cars and really become emotionally attached to them, which sounds ridiculous to anybody who's never driven a Miata. But if you have, you know that's a real thing. So if we're going to try to do this, we can't just go driving other people's cars and studying all the horses without actually studying riders to figure out how that works. So we really need to study drivers and people and how people work in order to make this work. So I'm going to go through two examples of how we can do a human-centric target setting and development without looking at competitive cars at all. The first one's fairly straightforward. What's the ideal drive position? How should we position somebody in the car and set up the controls? And you can walk through this sort of step-by-step very logically and very simply. You start off trying to figure out what's the most comfortable position for someone's body. And if you look at people with no loads on their body floating around in space, with no chairs, they're still sitting in a largely seated position. This is because if you just relax all the muscles, every one of your joint has muscles pulling in both directions on it. And when both those muscles relax, then you find sort of a natural lowest stress position. And these guys just relax into that position. NASA's nice enough to take data for us so that we can just look that up and figure out sort of our baseline for what is a natural body angle as a starting point. And then we take the person and put them in the car and try to figure out what should they be able to see out over the hood. And you know, if you have a car with a really long hood and you're looking, your eye line is way out on the horizon. If you look on the horizon, nothing seems to move. If you look right down in front of you, things are going a million miles an hour. Your sense of speed is really determined by the hood line of the car and the visibility from the driver's seat. So we want to make sure that you can see the road close enough to you that you get an honest sense of speed so you can control the car naturally, but not so close that it freaks you out. And so we set up some cars with a range of different visibilities and ran a bunch of different people through them and sort of found this sweet spot that overlapped where everyone was satisfied they had enough control and have enough sense of security and sense of speed. And you notice on something like an MX-5, we make that a little bit closer so the car feels faster. I first noticed this phenomenon on my first gen RX-7. That car felt really fast with its 100 horsepower because the hood line was just right like that. So once you know what the sight line should be and what the body angle should be, you have enough to start positioning the controls in the car so that every body size can fit in there and hit those targets. And then you start working out things like, if we want our hands at this kind of angle, when you're on the steering wheel, you can set where the telescoping wheel is, but you've also got to get the angle right so that when you turn over center, your arm doesn't completely go straight and pull your back up off the backrest. Then just once you're off the backrest, you no longer have any lateral support, and you are cornering if you just did that. So basic logical things like that. You obviously want the driving position to be centered. Your right foot's almost always on the gas pedal, your left foot's almost always on the dead pedal, so those should be the same height and spaced evenly apart at about the same distance that you stand, which is about shoulder width. Anything else is going to end up feeling awkward long term. And of course the steering wheel should be straight ahead of you and square to you, which surprisingly very few cars actually are. And we've only recently started doing this with this generation of cars as well. Start looking at the gas pedal. Your foot obviously pivots on your heel, so it just makes sense that the gas pedal should follow and be pivoted on the bottom as well. We used to hinge our gas pedals on the top. Most cars still hinge their gas pedals on the top. There seems to be a divide where expensive luxury cars are hinged on the bottom and cheaper cars are hinged on top. There is a cost impact to hinging on the bottom. I can't for the life of me figure out why, but it's a fairly significant cost impact, and so it took really embracing this human-centric philosophy for us to go ahead and spend the money all the way down to the cheapest car we make to do a bottom-hinged gas pedal. At the very beginning of the stroke, it doesn't make much difference. As you get deeper in the stroke and the top hinge pedal starts moving away from your foot, it starts getting a lot less linear and a lot less natural feeling for your foot. Once you know sort of where the gas pedal is going to be and roughly the angle, because you want your ankle angle to be based on what we saw up in space, you still have to tune the spring rate of the pedal, the way the car is going to respond, and the way the rest of your body is supported around that. So we tune the pedal. There's a load point we call road load. When you're driving down the freeway, whatever amount of gas it takes you to go a constant speed, we call it a road load, and that'll vary with speed, of course. But we'll find that sort of ideal ankle angle and try to get the weight of your foot and the spring rate of the gas pedal to balance out and stop right at that most comfortable ankle angle, and then tune the engine so that that's the road load point that you're cruising on the freeway. So it's minimum effort to just cruise at a constant speed. And then of course the seat has to be designed to support your upper leg so that as you go over a bump, the weight of your leg isn't making gas pedal inputs. And then most of the time you're on the gas pedal, that's your primary foot position. You've got to be able to get to the brake pedal very quickly. So we've got to set the height of them close enough that you can get from gas to brake without lifting your heel off the floor. That's really essential. A lot of car companies come at this from a completely opposite direction, saying we don't want you to be able to get to the one pedal or the other accidentally, and they'll make it so you have to pick up your whole leg and drop it down on the brake pedal. Well, first of all, that takes a lot longer. That can take about 60 miles an hour. It's about 10 feet longer. Here, look, a chart. Boom, a chart. So it's a fraction of a second, but that you cover some serious distance in a fraction of a second. But also, if you're picking up your whole leg and dropping it on the brake pedal, you can't control that initial input very well. And so you end up kind of slamming on the brakes, and as a result, you have to tune the brakes to be kind of sloppy in that beginning input, or else everyone's going to send themselves through the windshield every time they hit the brakes. So starting with the wrong pedal position sort of snowballs into bad brake feel. And so if you get this right, then you can go ahead and tune, if you're just hitting it with just the weight of your foot and the control of the fine muscles in your shin and your calf, you have much better opportunity to tune the brakes to feel like our ideal target. So we didn't have to benchmark to figure out any of that, but here's a benchmarking photo just to prove that straight ahead center driving position isn't that easy or common. This is the most egregious example we could find. This is a BMW M2, and they've got a perfectly good excuse for that because they just shoved way too much engine in the car. Nobody can fault them for that, but there you go. So that was a very sort of straightforward, obvious, simple explanation of why our seating position is the way it is. The figuring out the ideal throttle response is far less obvious, a little bit more esoteric. So we start from studying how people accelerate when they're walking around naturally at their own bodies. So in your normal stride, you're basically accelerating with your calf muscle at the end of every step. And at the other end of your body, all of your sort of sense of motion is in your head, and largely is as the output of a feedback loop that's balancing your head. You've got this subconscious routine in your brain that's keeping your head up on top of your neck, and as you move around, your neck muscles are having to sort of tense up and balance your head up on top of your neck. What we find is that there's a connection between an expectation of when you take a step, what your body's expecting in terms of what it's going to have to do to balance your neck. So if we look at that calf to neck relationship, and then we look at the way people make muscle inputs when they're moving something, there's an overarching theory called minimum jerk theory. Jerk is the rate of change of acceleration. So strangely, the way we tend to sense acceleration is we actually are sensing jerk as acceleration. So imagine if you're standing on a train, for example. If you aren't looking out the windows, you have no sense of velocity at all. As far as you're concerned, everything's just standing still. If the train's accelerating, you can just sort of lean into the acceleration and cancel it out. That you feel the acceleration, but it feels like a constant. If the train is starting to accelerate or stopping its acceleration or changing its acceleration in some way, that is technically called jerk, but that's what we sense as acceleration. If you've ever slid off a racetrack onto wet grass, and when you hit the wet grass, the car just accelerated. No, it didn't. It started slowing down less than it was before. The rate of deceleration changed, and you sensed that and interpreted that as acceleration. But really, it was just a jerk. What minimum jerk theory tells us is that every time a person moves their body, they're going to get their hand from point A to point B by accelerating and decelerating it in the smoothest way possible, with the minimum amount of jerk. And so what we see anytime we look at like the electromyograph here of a muscle, this is a calf muscle as someone walks, you always see this bell curve, which shows that minimum jerk input. And so we know anytime somebody makes a voluntary input, like to the gas pedal, they're going to make this minimum jerk input, and they're going to be expecting that minimum jerk acceleration at their neck with no delay because there's no lag between your ankle and your neck. So we have the same relationship in a car. Obviously, it takes a lot less ankle input to make a lot more acceleration when you're driving a car. But the basic fact that there shouldn't be a delay between this input and that response, and the fact that the minimum jerk input should get a minimum jerk response, that should hold true walking or driving. So we kind of worked up this theory and then tried to sort of test it out on some cars that we thought had really good direct throttle response to see if that proved out to be true. So in testing this 911, third gear, cruising along at, I think it was 40 or 50 miles an hour, and then just rolling into the throttle about 50% more. When you make a normal roll-in input, you have that minimum jerk input that results in a gas pedal speed that has that bell curve. And the result is, again, a bell-shaped jerk output, the amount of delay between the start of your gas pedal input and the start of the acceleration was unfortunately cut off here, but it's about 250 milliseconds, which is about the minimum that people can perceive a lag. Anything below 250 milliseconds, they usually can't tell any difference. We looked at the same thing on the Mazda 3. Obviously, same amount of gas pedal, got a lot less acceleration. But if we made a minimum jerk normal gas pedal input, we got the same kind of output. The scale on this is different. This is about 300 milliseconds, so not quite as quick as the Porsche, but not nearly as bad as that picture implies. Counter examples here: the FRS has about half a second of delay, 500 milliseconds, and then the response is this sort of bouncing jerk, which you feel is sort of kind of rubbery response. And GTI, there we go. The initial response starts out trying to be a bell shape, and then the turbo kicks in and there's a second one. Now this feels fun, but it's so disconnected from your input that it feels like, just the same from the passenger seat as it does from the driver's seat. It's a thrill ride rather than a sense of control. And so that's sort of a distinction in what it is that we're trying to do in the way we develop a car. That's what Jinbaitai really means, is we're not going to be so concerned with the thrill here. We're going to be concerned with the connection and the directness and the way the responses feel attached to your inputs. So we developed this car all on sort of human-centric target setting and development. And then at the end, we decided to do some benchmarking to see how we did. We already know our car drives better than a CR-V or a RAV4 or anything like that, so we didn't really bother looking at those. We went upscale and rented these cars and went for a drive, and were pretty pleasantly surprised. So we went and rented them again for this event so that we could show you what we found. What we'd want you to do, we're setting up a really short driving loop so there's enough time to get through 5 cars, because we want you to drive the CX-5 again in the same location. And put on your engineer evaluator hat, try to ignore the price difference, try to ignore the horsepower difference, and just focus on the responsiveness and the drivability and the controllability, that sort of that Jinbaitai feeling that we keep talking about, and in sort of the real world situation that we're putting you through. There's a lot of stop and go and that kind of thing. I'll give you some hints of the kind of stuff that we see when we drive these cars. The Mercedes has that big stagger in the gas pedal position that I was complaining about, so you really have to lift your leg to get up to the brake pedal. And the throttle response is really, there's a big delay at tip in and then a huge surge in acceleration. This one we actually took data on because it was pretty shocking for us. One of our normal sort of real-world driving scene data collection points that we do is just a normal city launch where you roll into the throttle about 40% over about half a second. So this would be your gas pedal input from 0 to 40%, and then you just sort of hold it there for 4.5 or 5 seconds. And what we expect is an acceleration response like that. This is acceleration G on that scale over there. You want a really short lag here, again, under 250 milliseconds if you can do it. You want the response to sort of match the input, very, very linear build up as the gas pedal increases, and then a smooth tapering off as the car catches up to your target speed. And that's pretty much what the CX-5 does. This is the 1-2 upshift. Got to do that somewhere. But other than that, we pretty much track what we're expecting for an ideal launch. This is what the Mercedes did in the same situation. There's a much longer lag, that sort of dead pedal feeling there for a second, and then it sort of lurches along naturally aspirated until the turbo kicks in. And at about 2 seconds, when that turbo hits, the idea, I think, is that you'll forget about the last 2 seconds because the turbo hit was pretty fun. To be fair, our gas pedal input wasn't quite matched to what we were trying to do. I honestly, this is real data from real driving, and I think what happens is there's a feedback loop with the driver, and when you tip in the throttle and nothing happens, I think they just subconsciously started backing off on the throttle a little bit, and you see they finally caught up to about the same throttle input, but they were kind of thrown off by the lack of response at first. It's my guess. I didn't drive it, so I'm reading into it, but reading into charts is what I do. On the Q3 had a couple of interesting characters. The steering response on this on the freeway is really direct, right around center, but it's not very linear. So it starts off with kind of slow response, but with no lag at all, and then at a certain point it'll just hook and really dig in and turn in harder. The freeway portion of this drive is very short. It's like a mile out ramp and then a mile back. So in that, if you can, try to sort of do a check around, moving around in the lane and see if you can feel that edge where it suddenly picks up. If you don't feel it there, you might feel it turning into the exit ramp as well. This has the steering wheel problem where it's too far away to, at least for taller drivers, to go over center without coming up off the seat. And then the brake pedal has a big long free play before anything actually happens there. The X1 strangely has the steering wheel off to the left, even though it's a front wheel drive platform. They don't have the excuse of having a giant engine in their way. So I'm not sure, maybe they're just trying to be consistent. The throttle response on this car is typically German. I'm sure this is intentional, but the first roughly half of the throttle travel is kind of low gain, and then about halfway through, suddenly it just picks up and becomes much more aggressive. I'm pretty sure this is intentional because we have an office in Germany, and all our German engineers want the cars to drive this way. And in fact, we tune our cars with that kind of throttle response for Germany because they have very slow driving and very fast driving. They don't seem to have anything in between. But it doesn't really work as well here where we have more of a variety. And then the car doesn't have any engine braking, so following distance is really hard to control. You let off the gas and just kind of cruises. And then finally, the Lexus, the steering feel in this kind of feels pretty good at turning and is really damped on the return. And you kind of the amount of damping it has kind of masks any chance of feedback. And then we found it had a very strange sort of body motion where it was kind of floaty and harsh at the same time. The back is under damped, but you could really feel impacts really, really harshly. Anyway, there's lots of obviously very nice things about these cars as well, so I don't want to feel like I'm so totally negative, but this is what we do. We go around and complain about cars. So with that, this is the drive route. It's very straightforward. A lot of stop and go, because that's one of the things we really want you to feel. A couple of notes here. When you're getting back on the freeway, you're going to have to merge left pretty quickly, otherwise you're going to get peeled off onto another freeway and go north. Take note of how the cars respond as you come out of that ramp and then have to adjust your throttles to kind of merge over a couple lanes. Our car does something strange that is hopefully good most of the time. When it sees that you're in a corner at relatively high G, it'll lock into a lower gear and stay there for several seconds even after you've let off the gas, because it's recognizing that you're on a ramp and might need to merge. And so rather than upshifting and then having to downshift again when you get back on the throttle, it stays in a lower gear and has more direct throttle response. It's one of our, I think that's one of the things that secretly makes the car work really well and also generates a lot of complaints when people aren't merging and they can't figure out why it's still hanging in that gear. But that's the challenge of reading minds with just a gas pedal and steering wheel. And then the other thing to watch out for is as you come off the freeway, you're just going straight here, but the speed limit drops abruptly, and the cops know that. We've seen a lot of cops hanging out right there. So when you transition back to the surface streets, slow down because they're going to get you. I think that's it. We've got a complicated driving rotation based on wristband color because we have traffic and lots of cars, and we're trying to get you through this before the traffic gets bad. But any questions before you guys hit the road? Yeah.
Ask one question as devil's advocate.
Sure.
All competitor cars that you compared with slower throttle response were turbocharged, all except two.
Sure.
So are you just saying that your big benefit is not having any turbo lag?
We made a choice not to have a turbo. So, and when we did have a turbo on the CX-9, we made a choice to bias it toward low RPM because we think that the response is really more important than the surge at the end.
But I didn't see you show any graphs for like CRV, RAV4, the price competitors.
Right, because we're not really looking at those anymore at this point. As we try to move the brand up market, there's no point looking in the mirror.
You don't think that people are test driving those back to back?
Yeah, we do. But we've test driven them, and I think you're not going to be surprised by the results.
Okay.
But you're welcome to, but I think the results are fairly obvious and not very enlightening. So.
I think that some of this that Dave's talking about looking forward to back of Morris I referred to this morning in his presentation. Some of this is our desire to sort of reposition the Mazda brand, if you will, to a slightly more premium position. We are seeing, dealers are seeing premium vehicles being traded in on Mazdas. We're seeing Minis, we're seeing Acuras, we're seeing Audis and BMWs coming in and people driving out in new Mazdas. As the interiors have been greatly improved over the last few years, the current generation of our vehicles, the Skyactiv technology that we're putting in the vehicles, the way they drive, we are seeing those vehicles start to come in, and that's the reason we've really made a conscious decision to benchmark against these luxury vehicles. Pricing-wise, there's going to be a pricing sheet in each of the cars, so you can kind of see where we fall out. Like Dave said, you can pay attention to it or not, but I think it's the reason that we chose to bring these cars here, though, is just to show you where we're looking, that we're always looking forwards, and we're trying to aspire to a different level of competitor than the RAV and the CR-V. Are those the price competitive ones? No question. Absolutely no question about it.
Yep.
So I'm noticing a pattern here that seems to line up with what the approach you took with CX-9 in terms of, the CX-9 is probably an extreme example because you tailored the throttle response and power band of that engine to what a three-row crossover buyer might experience more in daily life rather than making it all power, top end, it's very low, sort of torquey. It's better for that use cycle and it sort of nails that. And what you're doing here seems to be linking throttle response, steering linearity with a sense of control, but also smoothness.
Yeah, and this strategy and this philosophy is not unique to CX-5. This is what we do with all of our cars. And so, yeah, the CX-9 powertrain came out with a fairly extreme power and torque relationship because the size of the vehicle required a lot more output, and that output was better served right off the line.
But then how much of this, like at a dealer level, is maybe being conveyed going forward, where in terms of really getting into the nitty-gritty of throttle response, is that more of something you're expecting people to just pick up on naturally when they get in the car, or is there going to be a conscious effort to sort of inform buyers? Because I've had a lot of friends test drive Mazdas and they come back with this nascent sense of, oh, it drove really well. They don't really know what that means because they're not car people.
Yeah, yeah.
They picked up on a difference between that and Corolla, right? Probably a stark example.
Right, and
You know, I feel like going forward, I think Jake spoke about this, you guys are starting to do some of these driving programs and things that kind of put butts in seats in a more aggressive manner to get people to recognize that shift, but I'm just curious.
We are definitely trying to do that, and if you have any really great ideas for how to pull it off, we're open to them, because it's really not easy. You know, what has made a great car I don't think has changed over the years, but over decades, people have been programmed to drive a car and say, oh, it's really nice, it has a lot of power. And you know, technically, that's not always what caused it to be nice. Sometimes there's a correlation between a good responsive engine and high power output, and sometimes there isn't. And the reality is, as you can see, far more complicated, and we can't lock people into a chair and explain this whole thing to them. So yeah, our challenge is really butts in seats so they can feel what it's all about. And this proves that it's not an accident. There's some really hard thinking behind making them feel like that. Let's drive? Yeah. All right.